and I'm not going to cast this to Facebook or anything, so we'll just go with this. So let's see. So, Bobby, do you know what today's date is as we get started
Oc-
here?
October 3rd, 2024.
Mm-mm.
Uh-oh.
It's January 3rd, 2025. Do you know
Well,
why?
we just went into a time warp.
Yes. Do you know why, though?
We're at the edge of the winter selling
What you
season.
what you do today manifests itself in 90 days. Your
There you
activities
go.
from today. So, yeah, if you're watching this online, folks, my name's Brian Pate from the Pate Realty Group and Brian Pate Seminars up in Wake Forest, North Carolina. And I've got my buddy Bobby Carroll, King of Johnston County, Mayor of Clayton, alternate or unofficial mayor of Clayton, North Carolina, marketing guru, information guy. So we're glad that you're here. So we are recording this. It is actually October 3rd of 2025. I was just saying January 1st because, of course, whatever you do today manifests itself, folks, in 90 days. So if you haven't started working on your business plan for 2025, you need to get on it. Lots of opportunities to do so there and participate. So, Bobby, I'm going to start with some stats on the triangle here for the current and the month of September from closed and hot sheet stuff. So in September, the triangle had 2,485 sales closings, basically, for residential real estate. Now, for those of you that have never watched this before, you may be watching on YouTube or something like that after the fact. I concentrate on a 16 county area in the state of North Carolina, surrounding the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area. And we include 16 counties in that. So in 16 counties where there are approximately 2.4 million people, we have 2,485 homes available on the market, or had 2,485 homes sold last month. That's down from 2,638 a year ago. So month over month or year over year, that's a 5.7% drop. And are you ready for this one, Bobby? That's the fewest number of sales in the triangle market since, you want to take a guess? What year? Two,
2000,
2,485 sales in the month of September.
2015.
You got to go back to 2012 to
Oh,
see that
okay.
few homes sold again. So it's 12 years ago. Um, so yeah, we're definitely still seeing the slowdown. Looks like we may end up only doing about 31 to 32,000 homes this year closed. And that is a massively low number compared to 2 years ago in 2022 when we sold almost 44,000. And of course, during COVID in 2021, when things went bananas, we sold almost 49,000 homes, just as a comparison. So, very interesting. Average closed price in September was under $500,000 for the first time since March 2024. Average closed price was $490,500 for that 16 county area. So, in terms of active stats, the triangle market went above 8,000 active listings at the end of September for about a week. And that's the first time that that's happened since October of 2019. So we are seeing a gradual increase in inventory. The supply is still only about 2 months. So if you're a buyer that's looking in the triangle market, it's still really seller controlled. When you get down to a tight search of a $50,000 price range to your specifics, you may only have 2 to 3 options in many cases. And the time on the market is 22 days median for pending listings and 39 days average for pending listings. So if you're a seller and your house has been on the market for more than 3 weeks in the triangle area and hasn't sold, maybe time for a price reduction. And so when I saw that statistic, I said, well, let's go to the hot sheet and see how many price reductions there were in the month of September. Again, we told you earlier there's about 7,900 active listings. There were 5,277 listings with a price reduction in the month of September. That's over three-quarters of the market that had a price reduction. And amazingly, of those 5,277, 3,941 are still on the market in October, and a whole bunch of them, I did not even count them up. I think it was around 350 of them that were canceled, and another 400 that were expired, and then a few that did go pending. So that's kind of your stat update. What's going on in your market down there, Bobby, in Johnston County? Let's go specific to you.
Yeah, so Brian, in Johnson County, we've got a little over 1,000 active listings on the market as of today. 60% of those are actually new construction.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, 60%. And what that tells you is that if you have an existing home, you better be matching what builders are doing in terms of incentives. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yep.
But there is a strong comparison when buyers are looking at existing versus new construction. Ironically, get this, Brian, new construction actually costs less average price in Johnson County than existing homes do.
Really?
Yeah, and so I pulled the numbers of like the average is really like 367 is the average price of new construction, and it's a little higher than that for existing homes in Johnson County. Days on market are comparable to that of Wake County and the 16 surrounding counties. It's right at about 40 days. We have seen sales shrink, but again, new construction is carrying the load.
So with your new construction, what are you seeing in square footage? Because nationally square footage has gone down from about 2,400 to 2,100 in the last 5 years, as builders try to still build something that's quality and affordable, but trying to keep it. It's kind of like buying a bag of potato chips these days. You get a lot more air than you used to get because they can't put as much in there. So are we seeing that across new construction these days?
Well, if builders are smart, they're definitely building smaller, and we're seeing a lot more townhomes being built.
Okay.
And that makes sense because we're seeing, believe it or not, we're getting to a tipping point where land is not as readily available for development as it has been in the years past. And
Right.
so what do you think builders are going to do? They're going to stuff more units on that land so they have an opportunity to, make more money. And so it just makes sense that builders are really eyeballing the whole townhome. And that's an affordability thing too, Brian,
Mm-hmm.
because, first time buyers looking at 350 to 375 price point, unless they're driving way further south and east. If they're going to, the Smithville, Selma, if they're going, even further than that, then the affordability does get better, but then you're driving to qualify. So
Right.
they're definitely, I think the sweet spot, say in square footage for single family home would be somewhere around 1,800, 1,875, with a lot of homes being built in sort of that 1,500 square foot. Again, to kind of keep things right around the 320 to 350 price point.
Right. Well, and then in contrast, you got the parade of homes up here in Wake County. I went to a subdivision. I had to write it down to remember. Grand Highland Estates, which is in Wake Forest, up off of Purnell in the New Light area. And I didn't go in a house that was less than 1.7 million, and they were all under contract. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I think the top one was around 2.3 million. Now, don't get me wrong. These things were gorgeous. You walk in the front door and it's got the frosted glass that you could hit a button, use the electricity triggers it to either be clear or frosted. And, the backs of these places open up into massive, gorgeous swimming pools and things like that. But it's very interesting to see the what I call the way high luxury item purchase, the 1.5 million and up in Wake County and Durham and Chapel Hill. We had a $4 million place sold in Chapel Hill recently, just about 45 minutes from where I am. That market seems to be doing well, but it's also interesting to me. If I was going to spend $2 to $3 million on a house, I'd custom build exactly what I wanted. And I'm not so sure I'd just take something. Now, granted, these when a builder builds something like this, yeah, there's some very technical design pieces that are upgrades that you can't get, and I get that it's a custom built home, but I'd want it exactly like I wanted it if I was going to spend that much money. And whereas the entry level market seems to be on a pause, mainly because interest rates have gone. So the Fed finally said, okay, interest rates are going down. And all the news media outlets in September, interest rates are going down. Well, guess what they've actually done in the last 3 weeks? They've gone up.
Yeah.
Because I think every realtor worth their salt communicated with their database before emphasis on before the Fed spoke. Because when you say we anticipate rates going down, but they're already adjusting for your mortgage lender. So if you're a buyer and you were qualified at $400,000 3 or 4 months ago at 7.25%, you can probably get a 6.25 to 6.5 now, and it's going to save you $150 a month on your payment, which gives you buying power up to 425 instead. And every realtor worth their salt did that. And now the news media reports that the Fed went down on the interest rates. And now finally the general public says, oh, interest rates are going down. It's almost like we've been telling you this for 3 months that this was going to happen. And you and I even had a conversation at a conference, 4 or 5 months ago when we were at Rebar, and we said September's when it's going down, and it's either going to be 0.25%. I don't think we really envisioned a 0.5 point at that point, but we also didn't know what the employment numbers were going to do that drives that, and the inflationary numbers. At this point, people are now sitting here continuing to wait, almost saying, hey, let's hope the economy gets worse so we can get another 0.5 point off. And by the way, if that happens, the next Fed meeting and the next Fed announcement is November 7th, 2 days after the election day, which means that if you're wanting to find a lower interest rate, you're going to want to start looking around October 10th next week, because that's when you may see rates begin to adjust in anticipation of that. But we're seeing, nationally, it's very interesting. Mortgage applications are up nationally if you look at the last 3 weeks. And of course, that's a number you really have to watch daily in order for it to be completely accurate. And I just don't monitor it that closely. But I think you're going to see a dip in mortgage applications this week and next week. And then I think you may see some people coming back into the market as buyers agents are anticipating that rate drop after the election. Your thoughts on that, Bobby?
Yeah, I think still on the fence. And obviously there are a lot of things going on in the world that have an implication on that, Brian,
Agreed.
that kind of get people distracted. But I think that people are still waiting for something with a 5
Yes.
in an interest rate to truly get them off the fence. Now, I want to just real quick jump back to something you mentioned earlier about the explosion of luxury homes like 1.5 and up, and how that market is really going well. And just real quick, TBJ published this yesterday that Wake County is the 26th fastest growing county in the nation, and it's attracting a lot of wealth.
Yes.
So that's why you're seeing that needle really move dynamically in that segment of the market. And then I also noted that Johnson County came in at 59th in the nation in terms of speed of growth. And so we're just riding the coattails down here, brother. I'm just telling you right now, that's what's happening. But now, to your point about interest rates and kind of the lag of or the people sitting on the fence waiting. I think they are anticipating that next November announcement. So much seems to hinge on the words that come out of Jerome Powell's mouth.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, by the time he's spoken, a lot of things have already happened.
Right. Well, by the time he speaks, the money's already printed. That's part of the
Yeah,
problem. We just
yeah.
keep printing money to pay debt, and it doesn't work as well. But yeah, I think that when I do think that people are waiting. I do agree that that five number, that 5.75% mark is going to be magical because it puts,
Mhm.
compared to where we were 6 months ago, it puts about 16 million people back into the buyer pool. And the problem is we're going to sell less than 4.2 million houses this year. So you
Mhm.
do the math. We got 16 million people that have pent up demand to sell the home that they currently live in because a lot of people bought in 2020 and a lot of people bought in 2021, but they settled for what they could get and they overpaid for it. Now they have a little bit better idea of what they want for their living so they can look for longer and be a little bit more picky. And a lot of them are waiting to put their house on the market until after they make the offer. And so we're starting to see the rise of contingency offers again, at least here in the triangle market. I haven't studied the national market, but I know that we're starting to see that. But the other side of that is a good buyer's agent. If you make the comparison, hey, we want $10,000 towards buyer's agent commission. Well, why would you do that and finance the buyer's agent commission rather than taking that $10,000 and putting it towards a buy down and dropping your rate into the 5.5 range and potentially even a 5 3/8 these days? That's what the builders are doing, and that's the advantage they have right now. You have home builders, especially the large builders, the Lennars and the DR Hortons. They can do that buy down and get a rate at 4.85 to 4.9% as an APR. And unfortunately, the buying public is buying on what's my payment, kind of like the way people do with cars. And that's just a bad way to do it. I get that you can do that. I love the buy down piece. And I just think that people are starting to shop for houses the same way they do for cars. Tell me what the payment is. And they don't always think about what does it cost? And that's the difference between wealth and non-wealth is when you have the ability to walk in there and pay cash for the car, you're better off. But there are also some opportunities if you can get that 3% on a car payment, then why not finance it and keep your cash at bay if you need something else down the road.
I agree with you. I think the problem that we're facing in our industry, Ryan, is that there's a struggle with agents real estate professionals to really articulate why buy downs are so important. And so there's a real disconnect between the knowledge that what the power of a buy down versus more of the consumer saying, I want to get friction out of the way because I'm only thinking about 1 to 5 years.
Right.
I'm just thinking about the immediacy. So the friction is I need to have as little money as I can possibly have to get into a house. And then if the builder can help me even buy my washer, dryer, and refrigerator, so I don't have that outlay of cash at the same time with total cost of buying a home. That's at least that's in our market. That's what first time buyers and maybe a move up buyer that's going to like a 375 to 450 range. That's what they're struggling with. So I think
Yep.
that what we have to figure out as builders is where's the friction and how do we best apply that to the way that buyers, their attitudes and how they're buying.
Well, and I think getting people into a house as quickly as possible, I think is the key to your net worth growth and your long-term capital growth.
Mm-hmm.
And me, the house isn't just a place to live, it's an investment. And unfortunately, it's not an asset until it's paid for. And even after
Mm-hmm.
it's paid for, it's not 100% asset because you're paying taxes, you're paying your bills, et cetera, on it, insurance. So, and that's that rich dad, poor dad side of me coming out in my Robert Kiyosaki voice.
Right. I would even encourage all the agents to get ahead of I mentioned maybe I think you mentioned October 10th or something like that in terms of like getting ahead of what Jerome Powell might say in early November and get buyers out. Realtor.com actually put out a really good article the other day that said the 29th of September through October 5th was actually the best time of year, looking things sort of nationally, was the best time of year to actually buy a home. And here are the reasons why. We see lower trending interest rates. Yeah, they bumped up a little bit recently, but we generally are seeing interest rates trend lower. We're seeing more inventory to choose from.
Hmm.
buyers are experiencing a windfall of builder incentives.
Yes.
That and so when you look at less competition from other buyers out there, if those buyers can get ahead of the next announcement, I think they're going to really be better off. Um, you know, that I have to resist the whole mantra that buy now is what the whole real estate community yells. But look at all things considered and look at each individual and what their needs are, then maybe now is a great time to consider getting ahead of that.
Yeah, I think for a buyer, I'm in a mode right now for buyers. If you're gonna, let's get at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for our market, and I read that same article that you read about the end of September through this week being the ultimate time to buy from a national standpoint. Like I said, I think next week is the big one for our area. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a buyer in our market, and again, it doesn't matter what price range you're in. Now, as you elevate, we talked a little bit about that entry. It's amazing that we're talking about entry level at $400,000 to me. That's just killing me. But if you bump up to that 600, 750 range, it's also very interesting because what the builders are building at, let's just say 700 for a round number. What they're building at 700, there seem to be a lot of corners cut, number one. Some of the quality is not there, and I'm not going to name specific builders. If this hurts, then you know who you are. We'll put it that way. But there are $700,000 houses that are built like $400,000 houses, don't have a lot of upgrades, don't have a lot of customizations, and they're $50,000 overpriced because they've got the $50,000 buy down built into the sale price, so that they can partner with their mortgage lender. So you got to be aware of that. And I wish the builders were their margins seem to be fantastic. And of course, all of them these days have their ancillary services. They got their mortgage company, they got their title company, and things like that, and they're making additional money there. And they seem to be, and I'm not using this word in a fair housing voice, but steering people to those ancillary services in order to build that extra. And so their profit margins, their stock, the ones that are publicly traded on the stock market are doing fantastic because they're returning great numbers, even though we're only building somewhere in the ballpark of 900,000 to a million this year when we should be building 1.5 million. And so as we transition to that conversation, you and I have talked about for 15 years that we were underbuilt 2007 through 2010 by about 3 million homes. And then we never did reach the Great Recession build amount, which was about 1.5 to 1.6 million a year that we were building. We didn't see that, but for a split second there back in about 2019, and that's when the market was its best. We had inventory. We had, we had very aggressive interest rates. You can argue that the Fed should not have gone as low as they did in 2018 and 19, and probably should have kept rates closer to 4 in order to allow inventory to continue to replace and replenish itself. And you got a lot of people talking on, a lot in the presidential debates. Oh, there's too many corporate companies that are owning real estate now. If you look at it, the big companies that own more than 1,000 properties own less than 0.9% of real estate in the country. So it's less than 1% from that standpoint. Then you got private investors that may own, 10, 20, 30. That's just typical. And that cycles. We had an entire generation, for me at least, that was trained buy extra real estate because it's what you know as a realtor, and get somebody else to manage it, let them do it so that it's passive income completely. So you got a lot of people that are doing that. Then you hit the Airbnb craze back in 2015 where people started picking those up, and now you've got companies that literally, you got Dr. Rachel Gainsborough, who is very good at training people on how to do the Airbnbs, and especially the luxury end of the Airbnb. So you've got a lot of markets that are always ebbing and flowing. And then all of a sudden you talk about Hurricane Helene hitting the panhandle of Florida, the Gulf Coast, coming up through the foothills of South Carolina, the North Georgia and Lower Tennessee mountains, in Gatlinburg, and then to Asheville and on up into Boone and Blowing Rock and all the vacation areas. A lot of vacation rental properties were wiped off the map. And I don't want to be depressing here, but I'm a little nervous because of what we saw with what happened in Maui after the fires last time. You saw a lot of what I call vulture investors that went down there and started trying to make deals with people quickly to buy their property. It's going to be interesting. There are rumors, and I emphasize these are rumors, so this is unsubstantiated as I communicate this, and that goes against my newspaper family upbringing. But there are rumors that FEMA has met with homeowners in some small towns that may have only had 150, 200 residents and said, "You're not building back. We're just not going to build it back because of the risk." Well, if that happens, all of a sudden the government's dictating where people are allowed to build back. And now whenever you have scarcity, that creates more value. How many people will actually get a check from insurance because they weren't covered by flood insurance under the FEMA program? So this is going to be a really interesting real estate conversation. I don't want to bypass the devastation, the loss of life. I get that. And we're certainly keeping all of those folks in the western part of North Carolina and South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, where there are still people that don't have electricity and probably haven't eaten in 5 or 6 days while I'm sitting here spouting off on Zoom. I get that, and I keep those folks in my prayers on a daily basis, a couple times a day. But when we look forward 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, what does it look like? What do we expect to see? And I don't know that anybody can positively answer. We can talk about what happened before with, Maui being an example. But we've got an entire population and entire towns that were eliminated in the mountains. We have 8 houses in Rodanthe that have fallen into the Atlantic Ocean in the last, I guess it's 6 months when all of those have fallen. The landscape of where people are going to live in the next 15 to 20 years is changing. I think people are going to move to different areas, and I think the weather and the possibility of catastrophic nature of weather impacts is going to be something that affects people's buying decision. Am I alone on that, Bobby? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, and I echo your thoughts in terms of, our hearts go out to those folks in the affected areas. And I will tell you that my heart has been warmed by how the real estate professionals have really stepped up and been so generous with so many donating and helping to deliver the much needed goods and services that are needed in that area. But this is a very long-term thing that they're going to be dealing with. And I experienced this. All strikes very close to home. My sister-in-law lost her home in 1996 to, I believe it was Fran, and was homeless for almost 3 years. And so these are things that are going to take a long time to recover from, if ever, for some of these people. So, my encouragement to any real estate professional that's, has the wherewithal to help is, number one, just be kind and be generous and be a consumer advocate for these people. There are going to be people coming along offering, these people that own land, a little bit of land, they're going to try to steal their property. They're going to try, or if they have anything left, they're going to be these vultures that sweep in and said, "Hey, we'll help rebuild your roof," or whatever. And they're going to try to take advantage of people. So try to be someone that's a consumer advocate in that regard as a professional up there, if you have that ability. Because I think that's very, very important.
Well, and as a homeowner, I can tell you from experience in Hugo, Fran, and Floyd, if you are going to make repairs to your home, get 3 contractors to give you an estimate, because there are a lot of folks that come in that are scam artists. They get your insurance check and say, hey, just have the insurance company make out the check to us. They get the check and they're gone, and you never see them again, and they never do any
Right.
work. So you really have
Right.
to be careful of the scammers in this type of an atmosphere also. So, all right, let's switch to something a little bit more fun. Let's talk about the NAR settlement and adjustments that are being made there. I think that, this is my pet project for the year. I've been following this one. Again, if you're new to this, go to facts.realtor.com. It literally has hundreds of frequently asked questions, and you can find your question in there. It's very interesting to see a couple of things. Number one, people are making this a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Just treat it the way we used to, for my North Carolina agents that are listening or watching, just treat it like a for sale by owner. You have to call them in advance, find out if they're willing to pay you. If they're willing to pay you, you're going to get that agreement in writing before you show the home. And if they're not willing to pay you, you're going to go back to your buyer and say, the seller's not willing to pay anything. Do you want to pay me out of, and it would be over and above the sale price of the home. And if they say yes, show them the house. If they say no, we don't want to see it in that case, then don't show them the house. People are making this so much more complicated than it has to be. Listing agents, I think, have done a pretty good job of communicating. We've got a lot of folks I've had quite a few that as soon as I make the appointment, I get a text or an email and it says, here's what we're paying out. Here's Form 220. Here's other information. I think that that's great. I've only had one experience not being able to get a hold of a listing agent. And I've had one experience where the listing agent told me that, well, we'll consider the buyer's agent compensation once we see the offer. Well, if I don't know what I'm getting paid, I'm going to tell my buyer that they are likely going to end up having to pay all or a portion of my buyer's agent compensation that we agreed to. Do you want to see the house? And because that agent did not give me a number or give me an idea of what was being paid, the buyer decided not to even look at the house. And it likely was a house that met their needs, but because of the financial considerations, they didn't want to show it. Agents, remember, that's the buyer's choice as to whether they see the house in that situation, not yours. We are fiduciaries. We have to follow the instructions that the buyer gives us. The other thing that I want to touch on is open houses, because there's a lot of confusion out there with open houses. If you are an agent at a firm and one of the agents in your firm wants to host your open house, remember the basics of agency law in North Carolina, that listing belongs to the firm, and therefore every agent in that office is by default a sub-agent of the seller. So they can host that open house. So if you're an experienced agent, you want to let a new agent in your office host the open house, you can do that, and they don't have to have any buyer's agency agreement, any compensation discussion at all, unless somebody crosses the line of first substantial contact, and then they can become a buyer's agent if they choose by talking with the buyer and presenting the buyer's agency agreement to them. The complication comes with different companies because different firms operate different ways. If you're familiar with the Keller Williams model, each office is independently owned and operated, and each of them has their own firm license. So for example, if you've got a Keller Williams office at Keller Williams Preferred in Briar Creek, and they have a listing that a Keller Williams Raleigh agent wants to host, those are two different firms. Therefore, you would either need a written sub-agency agreement for that Keller Williams Raleigh agent to host the open house and be a sub-agent during the time of that open house. And by the way, that agreement to be a sub-agent can be from 1 to 5 on Saturday afternoon. And then at 5 o'clock, they turn back into a buyer rep for anybody that they can communicate with to follow up. So you can do those. And by the way, you are a party to that transaction. So it can literally be a bullet page of one page. The other option is to have somebody literally sitting with a table out in front of the house and saying, you can't go in unless you sign a buyer's agency agreement with me. And I'm not sure how consumers are reacting to that because we really haven't seen it because a lot of people have not been doing that properly. Now, that's different with a company like EXP or Real Broker or a Howard Perry and Walston that's here in the Triangle market, the Coldwell Banker HPW. Those companies all operate under one firm license in the state. So every agent that works with them, there may be 500 or 600 in some of these companies, every agent that works for them are under that same license because every office is under the same firm license. So it is a little bit different in each cases. And if agents have questions about it, I'm certainly happy to answer that. But the open house question and the how do we find out what we're getting paid have been the two big ones. And that's definitely something that people should be aware of. So with that said, Bobby, I'm going to switch to my last topic, and I'm ready. I want to get your opinion on this. The top 10 states with underwater mortgages. I'm talking about foreclosures, talking about pre-foreclosures, folks. The top 10 states with underwater mortgages. Louisiana, in excess of 10% of homes with mortgages in the state of Louisiana are underwater. That means that they're more than a month behind. Now, here in the state of North Carolina, it's very interesting. Did you know that 37% of the homes in North Carolina are owned outright? So only 63% of us have mortgages. And I say us because I still got a mortgage on mine. But 63% of people have a mortgage. We're not even anywhere close to a 0.5% of those being underwater at the moment because the economy's been here. But listen to these states that have underwater mortgage: Louisiana, Mississippi, Kentucky, Arkansas, Iowa, North Dakota, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Illinois, Missouri. There is that Midwestern stripe, with the exception of North Dakota, that you're seeing this. And I think that's where a lot of the job loss is in the United States from an economy standpoint. If you look at it, when you hear about the economy having, 4.3%, 4.4%, 4.5% unemployment as that grows, it averages out with states like North Carolina that only have about 3.8 or 3.9%. So it's very interesting to see that. I don't think we're at a point where we need to have that conversation about prepare for the short sales or prepare for the foreclosures. But one of the preeminent agents, Tom Bowman, who is nothing but REOs and foreclosures, his business is booming, and he's probably sold 80 homes this year that were all foreclosures, and they're affordable. I mean, you're talking about a home that you need to go in. It probably needs paint. It probably needs some work on it, but you can get it for $350,000 instead of $450,000. It's a great option, but your agent that represents you has to be able to go through the process and jump through the hoops in order to get a HUD key and to get permission to make the offer, because you can't just walk into those without having gone through the process. So I think that's a market that we watch. And I think a lot of it depends on what happens with the North Carolina economy. But like you were saying earlier, Bobby, there's a lot of job growth going on here. We've got all of that development in Wake County down around the new Lenovo Center and the 40-story buildings and the 8-story parking decks. I'm not sure if I want to be at the top level of an 8-story parking deck trying to get out of a Carolina Hurricanes game or an NC State basketball game. But I guess I could get out of an NC State basketball game, but because wouldn't be but 50 people there. But sorry, had to get my dig in there. So tell me, Bobby, as just kind of if you had a closing statement here, what would be your comments as we bring this to the end today?
Well, as it relates to distressed properties, I mean, certainly I lived through the results of 2007, 2008, and you were here as well. And so I felt like get to the depths of distress that obviously the Nevadas and the Arizonas and the Californias went to. I lived in Raleigh all my life. I've always felt we live in somewhat of a bubble, a triangular bubble, if you will. And so with state government and all the universities and then all the driving force of jobs that power housing, I think we're going to be pretty much okay unless, we get into some weirdness with, global things that could happen. But I think that we're very fortunate in our area. I think that there's some dynamics of our local market in Johnston County that are very intriguing for me, Brian. And that is, number one, we're literally like less than 3 years away from the completion of 540. Mm-hmm. And Clayton has not experienced growth like it will, friend, when we get to 2028. Because
Yep.
that connectivity and being able to get to the Research Triangle Park and getting to the airport 15 to 20 minutes sooner,
Yep.
albeit with a toll, I'll pay the toll. I
Right.
don't mind for that convenience. I think a lot of people will. So I think we're standing right at the precipice of some amazing growth, particularly south and then wrapping around west. Harnett County is going to explode. Chatham County is already doing it. The periphery of, you go to Franklin County, you're up in that area, you're very familiar with what's happening there. It's going to explode to Lewisburg. We're already seeing that. It's going to explode to Wilson. We talked a little bit about what's happening in Wilson.
Yep.
So I'm very positive. I know we have to tamper things a little bit with kind of where things are in the western part of the state, but all in all, if you're getting into real estate and you know how to work a database and you know how to diligently dig in with a mindset that every day you're looking for a job and you're looking to, as Sean Carpenter, our mutual friend, says, go out and solve problems, build relationships, and have fun doing it.
Yep.
You'll be okay.
Yeah. Sean would also add and play golf 3 times a week to that. So
And drink some weird beer every once in
and
a while.
drink some weird beer every once in a while. No question. So yeah, I agree with you. I think 540 is going to be a boon. I think the challenge, the big obstacle that we are going to have in the next 3 years as 540 is opened up all the way around. And this is for those of you that are watching that may not be from the area. This is a project that we've been working on since 1996 to basically build a 60-mile loop around Wake County, basically, that gets you into the sub areas and the suburban areas, I guess I should say. The biggest challenge is going to be getting water for those houses
Mhm.
because a lot of the land that is available has been bought up by development from speculators, and you have to either tie into the city of Raleigh system, which will eventually tax the lake system and the water systems here, or you're going to have to build another reservoir somewhere, another lake somewhere in order to get water, or you're going to have to figure out a way to get salt water from the coast and purify it and get it here. That's the biggest challenge that Franklin County is having right now, is that they're allocating water for builders. And I've heard that the wait can be as long as 2 years if you're just now getting your applications in. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the allocations and how they're done and what that process is. But I think that's going to be the biggest obstacle to development. And I think it's kind of interesting that we're talking about a lack of water when after we've just gotten 30 inches of rain in some parts of the western part of the state. I know that's a contrarian discussion, but it truly is one of the biggest challenges that we have. So, Bobby, I want to thank you for your time. I always appreciate getting to sit down and talk with you. We're going to do this more often. For those of you that have joined us live on Zoom or from another location, we appreciate you watching. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you click that subscribe button and keep up with us. And we're going to bring Bobby back on a monthly basis. We're going to have these conversations monthly going forward because I always like hearing what my fellow knowledgeable folks have to say. And thanks for being here, and thanks everybody for attending. And I hope you have a great day. And keep folks in Western North Carolina in your prayers.